All right, in August, this board approved a bold new vision for the UW system, the 2020 Forward Strategic Framework. Since then, we've spent a considerable time looking individually at 4 main focus areas of that framework. To date, we have discussed the educational pipeline, the university experience, and most recently, community and business mobilization. This afternoon, we turn our attention to the final UW system priority expressed in 2020 Forward, operational excellence. Framing our discussion is the reality that the UW system needs to educate more Wisconsin students, but with declining resources. As previously reported, state support for the UW system, when adjusted for inflation, is at an all-time low in 2015-2016. This is at a time when our enrollments are approaching 180,000, about 26,000 more students than 20 years ago. In the listening sessions that were such a key part of our strategic planning process, people made it clear that they recognize that the UW is being asked to do more with less. But they still want and expect us to provide a quality education. Understandable. And they ask that we do it with transparency, efficiency, and accountability. That's a big part of what Operational Excellence is all about. Indeed, as a board, this is one of our key responsibilities, to examine and analyze the performance of our institutions and use that performance to inform our policy decisions. To get us started, I'm going to call on President Cross. President Cross?
Thank you, Regent President Milner. As described in the 2020 Forward Framework, there are 4 main priorities. First, our core initiative under Operational Excellence, which is the 4th of the 4. The core piece is commitment to operational reform and excellence. Through CORE, the UW system is reaffirming its commitment to standardizing, streamlining, and consolidating its non-instructional operations throughout the state. The second part of operational excellence relates to the dashboard. The current UW system online dashboard was presented at the board in September of 2015. That actually dates back, though it wasn't on the web, dates back to the mid-1990s. Drawing from and building on the extensive range of performance measures in that dashboard, the system will be framing a 2020 Forward annual report card. That report card will help allow us to benchmark our efforts and assess our progress toward achieving the goals for each of the 2020 Forward strategic framework priorities and initiatives. Third, that third piece of the operational excellence priority is the on-time to degree efforts. I've noted before that operational excellence goes beyond backroom operations, but it also includes academic process efficiency. Students need to move through the UW pipeline as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Having a dynamic and robust experience while they do, that also contains costs. As we talked about at last month's meeting, time to degree is perhaps the most important component of college affordability. And fourth, the final element in the operational excellence priority category, the UW system is committed to rewarding faculty and staff excellence and to prioritizing our resources to increase compensation for our faculty and staff who are considered among the best in the world. Today, we will take a closer look at the first 3 of these priorities of our operational excellence. The 4th area, rewarding faculty and staff excellence, will be addressed in accordance with our usual timeline, which is at our December meeting. Here to present on the CORE initiative is Vice President for Administration and Fiscal Affairs, David Miller. Then we will hear after David, or along with David, we'll hear from Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs, Vice President Jim Henderson. He will address the board on the dashboard or report card model and the on-time to degree category. Following each presentation, we'll have an opportunity for some questions and discussion. So to get us started, Vice President Miller.
Thank you, President Cross. The UW system has consistently had lower administrative costs than peers, and we've heard about that many times before. The core project will build upon a long history of collaboration and shared services in financial administration, human resources, facilities planning, legal services, risk management, and a statewide network for information technology. The core project primary goals are to reallocate administrative staff time to more critical priorities, to control administrative costs and reinvest in instruction, and improve decision-making ability through enhanced data quality. To put it into a single goal would be to leverage the power of the system to transform operations. Continuous process improvement has consistently been undertaken throughout the UW system, but the core project is taking this to a new level by targeting increased collaboration, standardization, and streamlining. This presentation will discuss the project's origins, principles, and scope, and specific examples of initiatives underway. Let's review the core project origins. There are several primary drivers for the core project. Budget pressure. The UW institutions have absorbed $362 million in state funding reductions since fiscal year 2012. Staff attrition recruitment challenges. Retirements, recruitment and retention challenges have taken a toll on administrative staff, leaving vital positions vacant and sometimes unfillable, even after a surge. Institutions requesting assistance. Institutions face resource challenges and increased regulation. They look to system administration and each other institutions, for partnership. Improving inefficient and redundant processes. So due to those budget pressures, many manual processes persist, and investment in new streamlined approaches has been difficult. We need to reduce high-cost, customized systems and operations, and develop consistent data for reporting and analysis. Our capacity for data-driven decisions and responding efficiently to regulatory requirements is quite limited. As President Cross mentioned, another factor that has really accelerated this project has been the outcomes of the strategic planning effort and the prioritization of this as the fourth pillar of the plan. In fact, the subtitle there, Vigorously Pursue Transparent, Efficient, and Effective Operational Practices, has become our motto. Core principles. We have established the following principles to guide our work. Standardizing business processes across management systems and institutions must precede automation or the sharing of services. The triangle of productivity, made up of people, processes, and technology, must be aligned in appropriate roles before we can achieve effectiveness. For example, we have some operations that are too people-intensive despite having technology in the marketplace that could relieve that intense people-driven process. But it would require investment to start up. We have technology in-house sometimes, but may not have the people to fully utilize it. And we have business processes that vary widely among institutions that limit the effective use of technology and people. Sharing services to increase efficiency can take several forms. Operations may be centralized at one location or shared among specific set of institutions. This principle is designed to guide fitting the correct structure with the specific service. Limited resources has stunted investment in operations when those investments can lead to improved efficiency. This principle clarifies that some resources will have to be reallocated and reinvested in operations to save money in the long run. I mentioned that what's unique in the core project is not a single initiative, but rather the breadth and scope of the projects being undertaken simultaneously. In the areas of the budget system, for example, replacing an outdated, inadequate system with a new standardized budget management system increases data access, analysis, while freeing staff time to be spent on higher priority activities that are currently spent on a lot of data entry and repetitive tasks. In human resources, we seek to centralize and manage routine operations, on standardize and automate basic benefits advising, for example, to increase consistency. And in information technology, we've been talking about and are doing improving IT security through standard policies, procedures, and tools. Financial administration, we are providing specialized services centrally, such as travel expense audit, and leveraging shared technologies such as e-procurement. In procurement, investing in a spend analytics tool that maximizes the spending power of UW's institutions across the state to get best pricing. In risk management, sharing staff for specialized functions as opposed to having those staff at every institution. And in capital planning and facilities, we've talked a lot of this, with this board about our initiatives there. We have implemented a streamlined planning and construction process for projects that are already delegated to the UW system, and we're seeking that authority to do so for all program revenue projects. I'd like to take a minute to describe the processes we use to evaluate potential core initiatives and discuss some specific projects. We've already identified over 70 activities to review by surveying and sorting those functions that are common among institutions. The sorting involves examining the people involved in an activity, the relevant policies and processes used, and the technology used. We find that some services are already shared by more than one institution, but may be expanded to more institutions. It may be that centralizing doesn't involve the system administration office. It may be an institution that best provides that for other institutions. In reviewing shared services, we looked at the Educational Advisory Board's work with many universities and systems across the country and found 5 major areas that they have focused on for efficiency opportunities: finance, HR, IT, procurement, and payroll. In this big 5, we are already operating a centralized or shared services in some functions, have some in progress, and are examining others. Among those we examine, some are a poor fit. How do we determine whether or not they're a poor fit for standardized service? This table illustrates how we examine the fit based on cost, uniqueness, ability to standardize, volume, and complexity of the function. From this, we get our pool of functions that are most viable core projects. We study these, collaborate with the institutions on the most viable ideas. We are looking for projects in which the benefits outweigh the barriers. We compare the benefits of the shared service with the difficulty to implement the changes necessary. And in a typical XY axis graph, we want to take those in highest priority that have the greatest ease of path to implementation with the greatest benefit and work your way down. And finally, we determined the best model to deliver or implement the shared service. Some may have a low level of difficulty to implement, such as centrally merely providing guidance and tools and support. Some may be achieved by select institutions collaborating or regionalization. In some cases, the greatest efficiency may be fully centralizing the service. We then standardize the business process to fit the service model. Set the strategy and plan implementation, which results in the operationalized shared service. So now to move to some specific examples of what we're actually doing. Let's look at telephone service and voice over IP, which is a way of carrying telephone calls over the internet that your cable company has probably been doing for years. In addition, even AT&T is offering internet services for telephone lines. In your house, you may not even know the difference. It appears to be typical landline, but it's operating as voice over IP. So we're moving into that space. System and institutions have always purchased traditional telephone service through the state of Wisconsin's Centrex landline contract. Now, we have been developing and adopting voice over IP services as a replacement for Centrex. This has come about quite organically. We want to thank UW-Whitewater for their leadership in this area. And our Chief Information Officer, David Stack, will tell us just a little bit more about it.
I think the institutions, for the most part, are focusing on get from an old phone system to a new phone system that's more flexible and hopefully costs less. It does open up the door for things such as video phones and using the phones as a public address system, for example, in the case of an emergency. So there are additional capabilities that come with internet phones that we would never get on the old-fashioned phone system we have now. Since UW-Whitewater and UW-Platteville have led the way on this, other institutions are coming along and saying, yes, we would also like to leverage what you're doing. In particular, UW Colleges Extension and UW System Administration are partnering together to, again, connect with UW-Whitewater and to leverage the model that they've built. We hope that for most institutions that they will see cost savings and actually recoup their investment in any new phones or any new equipment that they need within a few years. So this should save us money, especially since the Centrex contract for the current phone system has recently been renegotiated by the state, and those costs are going up. So that's another incentive to move forward on this quickly.
In human resources management, with employee self-service delivered via Eve Benefits, we are creating central services or outsourcing non-critical functions to save employee and staff time. All institutions are now using e-benefits for new hires and annual benefit enrollment. Using e-benefits has eliminated many paper processes and taken data entry burden off of the institution HR teams, allowing them to do higher function activities such as direct consulting with employees. We've received very positive feedback from institution and employees about the efficiencies of this. The upgrade that we are near completing in the human resource system that I've been reporting to the Business and Finance Committee on at each meeting that is on time and under budget, has been foundational to adding this new functionality to the system to allow us to centralize more of these more routine operations. With verification of employment, consolidation and centralization. This is external organizations trying to verify information about our employees. Through a survey, we found out that staff across the system were handling 400 verifications a week. very time consuming. We have outsourced this at zero cost to the university. Therefore, we're saving all that staff time that was spent doing this verification. So that has been a very significant impact. The impact isn't felt, though, in 1 or 2 FTEs. We think it is the equivalent of 3 full-time positions. But it's not 3 full-time positions that you can put your finger on and say that one, because this was dispersed among all institutions and highly spread out. But the time spent is what's valuable here. That time can now be spent, again, on higher function activities. The next example highlights a case of inter-institutional shared services. UW colleges and Extension first centralized their help desk functions. Then they partnered with UW-Madison to serve as first responders and triage their help desk needs, and they would handle only the most complex requests coming back to colleges and Extension. This allowed colleges and Extension staff to redirect their efforts and increase coverage hours and simplify their user experience. UW Colleges and Extension CIO Warner Gabe will tell us more about his project.
Customer service was the #1 objective. Provide quicker answers to on a first call resolution basis over a wider period, coverage period during the week. There's more availability to answer questions throughout a wider range of time period throughout the week, including weekends. And we've seen a higher number of our issues to be addressed on a first call resolution basis than what we were experiencing when we tried to do it ourselves. When we consolidated IT services on the UW College's campuses as a result of the budget cuts from this current biennium, one of the things we looked at was how do we provide a service without people having to worry about who they have to call. So we wanted to provide one number statewide that everybody could call. Prior to that, everybody went to their particular location on their campus or called a particular number on their campus. And we wanted to make it as simple and straightforward as we could. We've been able to accomplish that. Working with Madison, we continue to use our existing numbers that we've had at Central IT for years. But Madison answers the phone. Madison notifies us when critical issues occur. We're able to respond in a consolidated manner across all the state. So that includes our 13 campuses, as well as all the 72 counties that we support on occasion when they have IT issues.
Looking at the budget system, what you see on the left of your screen is a picture of our not so state-of-the-art budget system. That is really it. That is our budget system. An old mainframe MS-DOS entry. That not appropriate, right? We are well into the replacement project. And I'm very proud to say that Frida Harris and other folks came forward when we decided to move on replacing the system and said we have to start with the time investment of changing business processes first and develop our requirements. And that's what the last year has been doing, developing the requirements necessary for a state-of-the-art budget system, working with all institutions and literally hundreds of people or 100 people multiple times have been involved in this, developing the right set of requirements before we go out and look at technology. So where we are is this very soon we'll be selecting the vendor to implement the system that will then integrate with the human resource system and with a shared financial system. What we're replacing are countless Excel systems in departments all the way up through the campus at every campus. with a unified budget system that folks will not only use, but want to use because of what it can produce. So this has incredible capability for saving a great deal of staff time and producing what this board, the president, we've all wanted for a long time: better forecasting ability, better scenario planning. All of this is done manually now, which just leads to frustration about why can't we know something sooner? Why can't we do better forecasting? Year-end closeout is all done manually, things like that now. So not only does this have potential, but it is a reality, and we are going to do this. We have the money saved to implement the system. We're very excited about it. In travel expense audit, we have a managed travel program, but on the back end, when expenses are claimed, we have a very clear set of policies that guide how reimbursement is done. But historically, this has been done at every institution separately. And through no one's fault, people doing it, because of the infrequency of it, may not be as expert as they could be in doing it. System administration is currently providing audit expense reports for its own employees and for Eau Claire, Platteville, and colleges. We will start up with Milwaukee, probably December 1st, and have had conversations with 4 other institutions as well. Service level agreements are used to ensure clear roles and responsibilities. And system administration has repurposed one existing person as a travel auditor to do these reports, alleviating staff time at the institutions who are basically outsourcing this to system administration. Having dedicated staff for this purpose provides greater efficiency, but also a more complete understanding of travel policies and procedures, and a much higher level, a reduced level of error rate, return to the user, things like that. In the second phase, we are considering regionalizing front-end travel management, which would involve regional staff to address training needs and provide travel assistance for institutionally sponsored travel. Spend analytics. Because we use several systems to buy goods and services and pay suppliers, including the 70% of our purchases that are through state mandatory contracts, the data about what we buy, how we pay for it, resides in so many different places. We needed to merge all of that data from multiple sources to truly know even how much we were spending on goods and services, and what supplier and what type of products were being purchased across institutions. This would allow us to group the spend together and leverage the volume. Through the core project, we invested in a spend analytics tool that integrates and enriches our multiple sources of spend data in a flexible dashboard that tells us, analyzes and tells us how much we spend together on specific products and services by institution, by supplier, by quarter. The next step is we have to use the data then to manage the spend to gain the leverage in the marketplace. It also gives us benchmarking against other universities, which will help us know if we're obtaining the best pricing available. Another project we've undertaken with significant potential relates to the student information systems. Each campus has a PeopleSoft-based student information system. However, each was configured based on each campus's definitions and information needs. Before Stevens Point implemented its version of PeopleSoft, Chancellor Patterson and his team agreed, or was financially persuaded, to partner with us to closely re-examine their business needs and practices first, before highly customizing the PeopleSoft implementation and installing it. They were highly successful. Let's hear a bit more from Jim Barrett and Greg Summers about their experience.
We couldn't have done this without communication, teamwork, a sense of understanding of project management and its goals, and an understanding of what the essential outcomes would be. One of those was the least number of customizations. The other was to make sure that we had all the essential tools that we needed when we went live. And I would like to thank the other UWs, the team, and the administration and faculty at the institution. We could not have done it without them.
So much as we were determined here to implement PeopleSoft without any modifications, we also wanted to ensure that we did so in a way where the technology wasn't driving our decision making. We wanted to keep students first, we wanted to keep our teaching and learning mission first, without letting PeopleSoft drive that. And we've found, to our surprise, that we've had a lot of good discussions that actually will benefit students and benefit our teaching approach. We had a lot of prerequisites on the books, for example, among our departments that didn't necessarily make sense for students. And departments are talking about those. The faculty are changing them in response to this implementation effort. Our advising practices, we think, will change dramatically in ways that benefit students. We're talking about our course withdrawal policy, another policy that dated back many, many years and didn't necessarily serve our students as best as we think we could. So the surprising thing for us is that even as we've been trying to implement this new system, we've really worked hard to ensure that students came first.
This pilot project has tremendous potential to one day achieve the holy grail of a fully integrated student information system. But we talked earlier about some streamlining efforts in the Human Resources Service Center. Now Chief Human Resources Officer Shanita Brokenburr will discuss her plans to offer institutions a web-based automated benefits advising tool.
What it will promote is greater consistency in delivering benefits information, efficiencies in terms of, there's not going to be a rush to manually do this, and just an overall greater consistency in service delivery and increased productivity for HR directors and their staff. One of the benefits of doing things this way is it allows us to redeploy our existing talent to other areas. So it frees them up to do some of the more transformative things. So it takes away from their plates the transactional nature of employee benefits counseling. We're just joining the ranks of other forward-thinking, forward-looking organizations.
We're taking further steps in human resources as well to centralize and automate functions that relieve institutions of administrative burden. Routine functions such as COBRA compliance and uncommon functions such as foreign national payroll are some examples. So in the end, collectively, these projects will add up to savings of staff time and expenses which can be redirected at the institutions. So most of the work is at the institutions, and the savings of time and dollars stays at the institutions, will help meet budget cuts that we are already having to absorb. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Do they have questions? Check for questions.
Thank you, Vice President Miller. I appreciate what we're trying to do here, and I want to open it up for some questions and dialogue. A lot of times the discussion of basic operations within an organization can be a little bit abstract, but maybe you have some questions to probe this a little bit.
I thought this presentation was just excellent, and what you've been doing is just outstanding. To be able to bring costs in line and routinize things and put a system in place is, I think, exactly what we should be doing. What if institutions don't see the wisdom Are they, I mean, I hear collaborate, persuade, you know, is there a point at which mandating happens, or is that, is it always voluntary?
When we launched the study for the budget system, I charged the team to say that this system will be so attractive that folks will gravitate toward it because it will be able to do things that they want to do as professionals. You know, people don't get up in the morning and say, I want to go to work and waste time. And they don't get up in the morning and want to go to work and do something mundane and routine and monotonous. I think people really want to do the best thing. Where the culture breaks down, which I think is really at the root of your question, is we are a system of multiple universities, not a university of multiple campuses. And culture is the biggest barrier. And the greatest challenge will be coming soon in the student information system. I'm not in that space and I'm not on campus, but it seems to me that a unified system could maintain a certain amount of data driven by common definitions from which data can be driven about all students within the UW system, and institutions can also maintain independent data in the same system that is not common to all institutions. But right now we have none of the above. They're very independent systems with built on different data definitions. And I think we can get there, but I think there's going to be a fair amount of culturally rooted resistance to doing that, and I think the president and the board will have to wrestle with that.
I've got it. Regarding student information systems, one of the powers of the system is being able to have a fluid transferring between colleges, between institutions. Would a more unified student information system help that?
I don't think I'm in the best position to respond to that really well, President Milner. But someone else may want to, I'm not sure.
It certainly would have an impact. The question is to what extent. One of the things we want to do is revisit the arrangements for transfer between campuses now. Mm-hmm. The TIS system has been praised, but it's dated, needs to be updated and refined, transported to a mobile platform as well. So that's one of the things we want to do. But the foundation of that, obviously, is the transcript, and the portability of that will be important. May I respond to Tracy's comment? Just to, if you, David, you have that XY graph up there that I don't remember where it was on this presentation.
It's I have to. It's pretty far back.
Okay. Well, there's the XY graph. If up in the upper right-hand corner was the easy to accomplish, quick benefits, as I recall.
People are getting dizzy. Right?
Yeah, including me. Yeah.
I think the
But that XY graph, obviously, we as David, there it is, as David suggested, when you're re-engineering processes and standardizing them and streamlining processes, and you're dealing with, in essence, quasi-independent institutions, they have processes in place culturally that they've used for years, and they don't want to deviate from that. That's totally understandable. But up in the upper right-hand corner, those are things that, boy, we can do right away. As you start moving down, you enter more of that conflict. Now what do? To David's point, hopefully it'll be so financially and functionally attractive to them that they will embrace it quickly. But it's going to require an analysis of their processes before you automate it. We have to make sure we understand our processes and streamline them so we aren't automating garbage. We're automating a streamlined process. And when we get into that conversation, hopefully we also understand where the bottlenecks are, where the inefficiencies are, where we often make mistakes, where are the problem areas, and then it's easier to streamline. Now, having said that, are there going to be some places, some situations where we're going to have to say, I'm sorry, I think this is a consolidated effort. We're going to have to do that. If you believe in systemness, the importance of system for some of this, the priority for me, and I think Greg suggested this, we've got to make sure we take care of students first. The campus has every right and appropriately should defend. This is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and it works for us. I'm asking for them to give us an open mind in looking at new ways of doing this. But there are certain things we're going to have to be forceful on. I don't think there are very many, but let me give you an example. Student information system on PeopleSoft on every campus it's all on the same platform. But if you can imagine a spreadsheet with cells and rows as sources of data captured, and that's a data field. In this field, let's call it cell C1 or whatever you want to call it, that's where the last name of the student goes. Well, campus X will have the last name, another campus will have the first name. So the data definition in that cell is different. So then we have to have, in order to aggregate that data, we have to have an interpretation or translation product like Mylar in order to make that transfer. Now, is that important? Probably not. So I'm sorry, we're going to have some consistency. But then on the other side of that, outside of those cells, the campus wants to know certain things that don't need to be aggregated. They should have the privilege of putting in those cells whatever they want in order to use effectively. My point is, it's going to be a balance. I'm also going to argue that there are a number of things that shouldn't be standardized. One of the principles that I operate under, the purpose of a system has to respect and value the diversity of type of institution and how they got that way. We cannot homogenize them by creating policies and systems that make them all look alike. How do we value that? Now, I would argue a lot of the back office support data systems can be totally standardized. How they use it might be different. How do we respect that? So there is no single answer to your question, but the benefits, if you look at this chart, the benefits are really, they have to be obvious. And as we keep diving into these steps, we have to make that clear as well.
President Cross, I have seen a significant change in the last 2 years in institutions coming forward in our collective meetings saying we want to do more collaboration, that we cannot afford to maintain a lot of independent systems in the future. And I really have seen that changed a lot and will be critical. Thank you.
Actually, a follow-up to that. I was involved in a private business with the implementation to conform with Sarbanes-Oxley, and I'm sure some people around the table were involved with that at some point in time. And sometimes it required replacing unique systems that were actually more effective. And it was necessary because to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley, there had to be a uniformity. And what happened in the long run, even though those unique, smaller systems were more effective, devised by the managers in that particular department, after so many years, it clearly was better for the whole organization. And sometimes, particularly with those backroom operations that are not necessarily discrete, it's necessary to do a bit more than just a bit more pressure to have uniformity. Time helps. Time helps because you can have the systems working together.
A recent success story is the student affairs officers mentioned it, which is compliance with the new federal requirement in Title IX. So because that came at us quickly, we took a centralized approach and developed one central system that can provide this training to all institutions, to every person at all institutions, and can be tracked by person for compliance, all in one system. That was something that in which the regulation forced a very quick response, sort of similar response we've handled with FLSA as well.
I guess the other thing besides regulation that forces us to do some things that initially we think we don't want to do, but it turns out to be good, something like you mentioned with Sarbanes-Oxley, is money. If you don't have enough money, you have to find a better way to do the job. And I would think that all the family members of this system realize nobody has extra money anywhere.
Right.
And if they can find a way to use what they have better and therefore free it up to do other things, I think that would be a great it should be an ongoing great motivation in this. The other question I have is, as you get more and more into the system-wide, I don't know where the information, how you've got it held, but my constant worry from another one of my private sector experiences that I have with a company is the way we're being completely, they're always being, the cyber attacks on systems, and thousands a day where they know there's a pot of good information. And I'm wondering if there's any issues we're dealing, and I know I'm trusting we'll be dealing with them well, but is that going to be larger with the larger system approach to it?
There is a system approach to it, and that is twofold in standardized policies, and then the implementation of that policy is really at the institution and in those buckets I was talking about with system-wide tools and guidance, and then some centralization of the service where it fits the institution best. We're already doing that well. We're not trying to see something that is working well. But if an institution has not yet implemented that, we can implement it together for them or a collection of regional institutions.
Thank you. And thank you, David. David's been providing updates for us on the Business and Finance Committee, and so thank you for that as well. But I have a comment. It's a public plea for quantifying the savings as they become available. Because of the way we budget, it's impossible now, and given the decentralized nature of some of these functions, to quantify how much all of this is costing, these activities that are now being standardized. So to the extent we are able to quantify savings, which I believe we should be able to do, that'll be so important to our stakeholders. We can then, to follow up on what Regent Farrow said, we can point out that we've reallocated funds to other higher priority areas. So I really hope that can be done in the future.
I'll take a, David and I have been talking about that along with others, because that's what I've been insisting on as well. One of the problems right now is that if we were to throw a number out there for something, let's say one of the pieces in this package, it would range from, I'm going to say, a savings of $4 million to $25 million, depending on which steps you ultimately implement. Those are the kinds of things we're dealing with now. We don't want to throw out these wild numbers like a lot of consultants do when they look at it. We're trying to be a little more precise.
But when we're finished, we should know.
That's exactly right. Mark?
So I'd like to follow up on Regent Mueller's comment on savings. So this sounds a lot like a lane journey in a manufacturing company. And we're probably a little more critical when we talk about savings than, David, when you were talking about reallocating to a higher purpose the work. Well, the argument would be, well, then you didn't save anything. You may have got something more done, but you didn't reduce your cost. You may be more effective, but didn't reduce your cost. So oftentimes when a company starts down this path, a lot of people get nervous about, okay, we're going to, at the end of the day, we're going to eliminate, X number of roles. The way a company would typically combat resistance to going that direction is say, we will not terminate positions or lay people off as a result of efficiency improvements. So I guess one question is there been a discussion about that, or at the end of the day, do these saved roles just get rolled off into another place? And if that is the case, how do you deal with, that's not what I was hired for, and,
I have much greater concern about recruitment and retention than whether or not we will have to lay off somebody as a result of an automation. We're having a much harder time filling key positions. And in the last meetings, Business and Finance Committee, we were talking about how Eau Claire was managing their savings, and Chancellor Schmidt was appropriately talking about protecting instruction and taking as much as they can on administration, which we've been doing for 12 consecutive years, taking as much of the cut on administration as possible. And even I opened this by saying we've consistently been below any benchmark staff measure on low-cost services. But I made the remark at the committee that all that means is something's not getting done. That's really all that means. And that's a little scary. And when I talk about saving time to move them to a higher priority purpose, I think it's doing something that we should have been doing all along, that we're not getting done now. It can be a compliance issue where if audited, we wouldn't be in compliance because we're not getting it done. We have to figure out how to do those things better, and I think the savings is going to go there.
If I may add to that, Regents, having come from the manufacturing world, I understand the re-engineering lean manufacturing principles. I think there's going to be a mixture in here of, let's take the budget system, the antiquated budget system we're operating under. That's going to cost us some money to implement. It's going to take a little bit of time. I bet everybody over here, and if anybody's a dean here or a department head, department chair, I bet they have their own spreadsheet on how they manage their budget. I would venture to say I bet there's 5,000 spreadsheets around this system. And none of them cleanly interface with our financial system. So at any given time, we don't know where we are. And that has to change in a modern organization. That's really important. In that particular area, it's less about efficiency and more about effectiveness and quality and timing. So that's one area. Then in other areas, you will actually eliminate the need for positions. Now, what we do there, a lot of this will be on the campuses. So it's hard for me to say, okay, here's what you can do. But that option needs to be available to them, not only in the tight budget time frame, but just because you also improve and reduce the opportunity for errors. And we have enough of that. And if you standardize and streamline a process, you don't just make it more efficient, you also reduce the opportunity for error. And that's part of our goal too. But I think the savings that we accumulate here has to be articulated. And I'm not trying to avoid that. David knows I keep pressing him on that. But I'm trying to make sure that we don't make a statement that's just totally ridiculous. Any other questions? I would add to that, there will be savings here. That we're very comfortable saying that. The question is how much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. The other two pieces that we're covering on the operational excellence piece today relates to the dashboard or report card and the time to degree. And Vice President Henderson is going to cover that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I do want to talk about those two very important ideas that are woven into the 2020 Forward framework and that are major components of this operational excellence area. We're going to focus on accountability now and in the future and time to degree. Support for the timely degree completion is infused throughout this 2020 Forward framework because we know that it's a key to affordability, cited among the top goals for stakeholders who help shape our framework. So first, let's talk about accountability. I want to begin by starting to look at a timeline and acknowledging the work that's been done in the UW system as a national leader in this area. And as someone who has worked in several higher education institutions, I can confidently state that we are a national leader when it comes to data transparency. The UW system has the longest history of accountability reporting in the nation. The timeline shows that history, and that we were the first public institution, public higher education system to provide a report on accountability to its board, the governor, the legislature, and the people of the state. Accountability for Achievement, which you see on the left-hand side of that timeline, was published in 1993, 94 through 98, 99, and it was a result of a blue ribbon panel, the Task Force on Accountability, convened by Governor Tommy Thompson. Over time, the report has evolved to reflect broader initiatives and budget priorities. And most recently, Acts 32 and 55, which you see over on the lower right-hand corner, added new levels and layers of requirements to report out to the legislature and stakeholders. The current tool that we use to document our progress is the interactive UW System Accountability Dashboard that was launched last fall. The web-based dashboard accomplishes 4 tasks. It displays key performance indicators, KPIs, in an interactive and user-friendly way that can be manipulated to display trends over time, data from single UWs, the entire system, and a set of peer institutions. It also addresses the needs and interests of legislators, serves as a resource for the Board of Regents, and is an internal management tool for the UW System Administration and the UW System institutions. It's also available to the general public. It includes 46 key performance indicators determined by a consensus process involving broad input from internal and external stakeholders, including key leaders, legislators, chancellors, provosts, and others. And it also provides supplemental information regarding 22 additional items. So we do a lot of accountability tracking and reporting. But I want to zoom in on one particular existing dashboard indicator, and that is on progress and completion. Because within that indicator is a metric that, as we've all heard, is critical, is time to degree. Well, why is time to degree so important? Well, there's a direct connection between time to degree, the total cost of a degree, and student indebtedness. We hear from our members loud and clear. The issue of student loan debt and college completion are paramount. So, how can we build on the good work that we're doing? Well, let's first look back at the graduation rates. When we look at the graduation rates over the last 30 years, both 4- and 6-year graduation rates, they've increased. The 4-year rate is interesting because it dips down, but the 6-year rate is pretty much going up and to the right. We're very proud of this improvement, but we need to maintain that success and keep those graphs moving up and to the right. If we look at the lens of time to degree, again, we're making progress. Over the last 20 years, we've helped shave down the time to degree on average by nearly a full semester. Again, there's room for some improvement there. We recognize the pressure that students and we as a system face in the work ahead to make progress on this metric. Now, I want to say a little bit about time to degree. It can be affected by a lot of different factors. Many students can only attend part-time because they are working to support their family, themselves, to pay for tuition. Other factors include students changing majors, students' families and financial issues, as I indicated, and students' decisions to take advantage of educational opportunities such as study abroad, internships, double majors, some of the key performance, some of the high-impact practices as well. So the time to degree is important, but it's also something we have to keep in mind for several factors. So there's another important concept or in terms of this timely completion, and that is the credits attempted to degree. Well, again, we see some notable improvement. It's gotten better, but still, I think that there's a lot of room for improvement there. So we're going to continue to work on a number of important areas to help students achieve academic effectiveness and optimal efficiency. The four major areas that have been identified are seamless transfer, and there was discussion earlier about transfer and would a unified student information system help there. I think that's the area where we receive the most questions from parents and from students and their families. We've made a lot of progress in working with WTCS and between UW institutions, but there's also room for a lot of progress to be made. We have to know more about who the students are who transfer, what are their experience, and how can we facilitate that. So we have to modernize our transfer information system, and we have to develop new articulation agreements to facilitate that transfer. Remedial education. Now, as you may recall, as I announced in August, we've set a common cut score for math remediation for all of the campuses. And our goal is to reduce the number of students taking remedial courses in the UW system. And we're doing that in multiple ways. In January, we're going to have a workshop hosted where all of the campuses are invited to send representatives of the math departments to learn from the successes in the University of Maryland system, from the Tennessee Board of Regents, and from the Dana Center at UT Austin. We're also initiating work to collaborate with K-12 to work with their staff who are teaching math to do more professional development and help them in terms of their effective instruction in mathematics and to help students prepare better for college. The issue of degree requirements also has a big impact on time to degree. We're going to work with the campuses on looking at what are their degree requirements. The questions that have been raised surround how many credit hours are required for a degree, and so we want to work with campuses to limit the number of degrees that require more than 120 credit hours for completion. We know that there are certain degrees where accreditation and other professional standards require more than 120 hours, but there are also some variation among degrees that we need to look at and see if we can't streamline that. The last on this list is college options, and the idea of college options is that we want to work with K-12 in order to provide students the opportunity to complete college credits while they're still in high school, so that when they attend the university, they will be able to apply that toward their degree and again cut down on the time to degree. There's no more important issue for UW institutions than student success. With the number of students served by the UW system increasing over the past 20 years, the number of students needing additional support to be successful has also increased. Many other areas in the 2024 strategic framework, such as 360-degree advising, new traditional students, and fluency will play an important role in ensuring that more students graduate and in as efficient a manner as possible. As we implement this 2024 strategic framework, the current accountability dashboard will remain an important resource for monitoring and demonstrating our performance. However, let me end today with what is new. As we identify performance measures for the new strategic priorities, we will leverage the existing measures and they will serve as a source for an annual strategic framework report card. We will create a report card especially geared toward success of our strategic initiatives. The first thing we'll do, and what we have going on now, is teams to build an operational plan for how we will pursue each of these desired priorities. They will identify performance metrics to go with each of those operational plans and set benchmarks and goals. Secondly, existing and new performance metrics will be integrated into the current accountability dashboard as appropriate. So if we're required to come up with new metrics for our strategic framework, we will incorporate that into the dashboard that we have online. Third, a separate annual strategic framework report card will be developed to track and communicate progress against these priorities. This new report card will be presented to the Board of Regents in the fall of next year, and we will provide annual updates to the board on our progress. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this afternoon, and now if you have questions, I would be happy to address those.
A couple of observations. As to this business of time to degree, a couple of our campuses, namely Madison and La Crosse, positively color those charts and numbers. And you might want to consider holding the rest of the system harmless from them to get a little different and in some ways important view to us. Secondly, since Jim, you're relatively new, I've been asking since coming on the board to challenge our economists around here to help us understand the bottom line economic impact of reducing from 9.5 semesters to 9 semesters to 8.5 as to the family and the student and to the institution. Cutting off one semester is a 15% improvement, cost saving, 20%, 12%, what is it? Because I think Wisconsinites and people around the country are reading articles constantly about $25,000, $26,000, $27,000 of debt. People are beginning to understand that. But if we can drive a greater understanding of the real world implications for the institution and for the student and the family, if in fact we can be increasing discipline with regard to that issue. Earlier this week I was on a campus, met with the three leaders of the student government. Sean, Jared, Katie. All three have been stopped off for different reasons. Two of them had been on other campuses, then came back. In two of the three cases it was lack of money.
Right.
So try to help us on the economic impact.
Okay. Well, I think that your issue around lack of money, I mean, that has been my experience on the comprehensive campuses where I've been, is that students are finding it very difficult to continue on full-time because of some of the cost. And some of them are unwilling to take on some of the debt burden and they would rather stop out. And so that's why I think for most of our campuses, the 6-year graduation rate is really the appropriate number. And as we look at that, as we look at the average, it's not just the extra cost that is expended to attend school, it's also the loss of earning capacity that in that semester that if the person was employed full-time after getting that college degree. So there are significant costs.
Let me ask a question of Regent Whitmer. How would you like for that to be expressed? In actual dollars on average or in percentage of college costs? What are your thoughts on that? What do you think would be most understandable?
Well, what do we know? We know change your major, delays it a year. That's important. That's big. That's understandable. I don't know the answer, but my instinct would be that it could be in terms of a percentage. The other challenge, of course, is that as we move people through quicker, that's going to drop enrollment, and with that revenues, that's a different issue.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the, commitment to helping students obtain their degree in a timely manner, especially with the financial stressors now. But with that said, I wanted to urge some caution with some of these well-intentioned policies. They potentially could have some adverse effects on the students, and I just don't want to infringe on the rights of students, and that is to say the students' right to choice and their ability to chart their own academic future. Currently at some UW campuses, I fear that there are policies that do limit student choice, and I think that policy should not be made at the expense of the student choice to make a metric look better, but rather it should be developed to help students achieve their academic goals that in turn will improve the degree metric. Vice President Henderson, do the students of the UW system have the commitment from your office that the goal of the policies will be to help students achieve their academic goals in a timely fashion while doing your best not to limit student choice?
Absolutely. I think that, the point that Regent Whitburn made about if you change major, it often delays, your graduation. But the other side of that is you also get one opportunity to be an undergraduate. And from my perspective, that one of the best pieces of being at a university is finding out about opportunities you never envisioned before and finding out what is a good fit and what is not a good fit. That in my discipline of mathematics, I've certainly seen people who think that computational mathematics is a lot of fun, and then they get to the sophomore level and they're asked to do all of these abstract proofs, and it's like, I didn't sign up for this. And so their ability to change majors is vital. And so I think that what we're after is that we want there to be the opportunity for students to pursue their educational opportunities in a way that is cost-effective and that they're not seeing barriers put before them that are keeping them from achieving what they want to achieve. And so, we've all known people who have wandered around the wilderness for years in academic programs, and there are guidelines and limitations that we need to put on that. But I also believe that we need to provide opportunities for students to find that passion and to succeed.
Thank you.
Just one follow-up, and what I think is important, an important conversation. Regent Tyler made reference earlier to the unfolding, ongoing research as to the importance of post-secondary education in the real world of work. Our board 3 years ago said, time out, we need to do a flex plan, which we're now scaling up. And what's that all about? We are below the national average in the percentage of adults with four-year degrees in the done pile. And I think in this context, it's worthwhile to remind us that part of what drove the initiative that you, President Cross, while you were in your earlier job, and Governor Walker in nudging forward with Flex Plan, was that we have in Wisconsin 1 citizen in 5 been to college but didn't finish. We have the reality of those challenges as we talk about respective interests of students doing what they want to do, what they can do, against what we're offering in an environment where, whether it's the institution or the student or the family, there are in fact limited resources.
Well, if I'm the poster child for taking a long time to get your degree, that would be me. 30 years. I started actually after high school. And my fear is that, we can't apply a cookie cutter mentality. And it's very important to not establish roadblocks for students, is to keep things open and have incentives to get things done. A couple of programs that I'm very interested in are happening over at Eau Claire. One of them is the advising. It's a 4-year contract where students are encouraged to sign a contract with their advisor so that they're on track to do that and that they're fully aware of all the consequences if they don't do that. But then there are those students, like myself, I made a change in my degree choice and what I wanted to do. And that, I did have credits that really didn't count for things, but yet, they have a program over there as well, where once you've finished your degree, you can go back at a discount for 25%, if I'm correct, if there's room in the class for you to do that, and you get a discount. And I think those are the type of things that students need to know about and hear about, and I think they need to happen on every campus, because especially if we're going to go 2020 forward with the non-traditional students and trying to reach them, let's try to make this as easy as possible and remove roadblocks instead of setting them up to get everybody going in the same direction.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
I do want to point out something before I wrap this up. And we heard this morning from the student affairs officers, and something I wanted to say that I think may actually be more appropriate right now. When we talk about completion, graduation rates, and in essence, student success, what we do know is that increasingly the student affairs positions are going to play a greater role in helping those students who are currently not succeeding. So how do we do that? We are experimenting with predictive analytics. You heard them talk about triggers. They don't show up for class. They may not show up to eat with a meal plan. Other little triggers that prompt action. And those institutions that have been extremely successful in reducing the achievement or opportunity gap. In fact, I think at Georgia State it's 0. There's no difference. I think that's true, Jim, at Cal State Fullerton as well. In looking at what they're doing, they're using these predictive analytic tools and then incredibly providing people support, advisors support, engaging, what we used to call intrusive advising, and that sounds a little offensive, so today we call it intensive advising. So it's the same thing, but actually engaging aggressively with students. So from my perspective, this is a place where maybe the savings we accrue on the support back office stuff can help us in this area, because that point you were making earlier, Regent Whitburn, is so appropriate here about getting more students through. So I'll close this up, if I may. So why is operational excellence so important? An article earlier this week in the Hechinger Report provides some perspective, but it also bothered me. It reports that a series of recent surveys, not just one, but several, are showing, and I'm going to quote from one of them, okay? Widespread skepticism about how colleges and universities are run, how much they cost, and whether or not they're worth the money. End of quote. That never used to be the case. It went on to state that the firm Public Agenda had found that nearly 60% of those responding said that colleges mainly care about the bottom line, and 44% said that colleges are wasteful and inefficient. What's more, the survey found that nearly 60% of respondents said having a college education is no longer really necessary for a person to be successful. That last finding is particularly disturbing because it's almost the opposite of what we're hearing from employers who say, and you heard Regent Tyler, the need for an education is really more important today. We need people in Wisconsin, but we need more of them to be educated. That's a challenge we face. And what we've heard here today from David and from Jim, and really from the student affairs folks, but also from Professor Basting. We have a long-standing commitment to administrative excellence and to an efficient, effective academic process. And we have a long-standing track record of successfully achieving both. We really do provide maximum value for minimum investment. So that isn't just some breezy catchphrase. In its report last summer, and I think I've shared that with most of you, the Wisconsin Technology Council pointed out that the average expenditure per degree granted by the UW system is considerably lower than the national average, and also is lower than virtually all of our Midwestern peer states: Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Indiana, Minnesota, and Ohio. And as you may recall, the tuition we charge was among the lowest in that group. So not only are we producing the graduate the cheapest, we're charging the least to those students who acquire our services, and of course the state's contribution is the lowest. I find that interesting. But even though we're efficient, we can do more. For students and families, it is incumbent on us to find ways to maximize their return on what they invest in us. That means offering the best possible educational opportunities while at the same time addressing the 5 components of college affordability. Not just one of them, but all of them. State funding, financial aid, what it really costs us to deliver the educational experience. That's a piece of what we're talking about today. How do we find savings in what we're doing without sacrificing the quality and importance of the interaction between faculty and students? Tuition, of course, and time to degree. Time to degree, as we heard from Vice President Henderson, is particularly impactful, successfully getting them through. Several of our initiatives, 360 Advising, Seamless Transfer, Career Connect, and others, are designed to really improve this and build what we're doing. But let me share with you an example of how this could be, in some ways, operationalized. We've already begun working with corporate partners in the Fox Valley, Thrive, Bemis, and some others, who not only need talent in the IT area, but they just cannot get enough students to come into that discipline in the region. They're shipping jobs to Florida, obviously to overseas sites. And their question to us was, what can you do to help us address this need? We're working alongside of them to explore, design, and develop a 1+3 with Oshkosh, Green Bay, the UW colleges in the region, and the Wisconsin Technical colleges in the region, the 2 of them, to provide that first year of IT in the high school. And in doing so, allow the businesses and corporate partners to engage with those students in the high school, offer them summer jobs, connect with them, and then they have 3 more years to finish that degree, and continue to work with those businesses. But so we can attract them into the discipline, reduce their cost to go to college, and fill a huge need that Wisconsin, and particularly those employers, have in that region. In concept, this kind of collaboration between different systems will also involve student internships and other high-impact practices. In addition to that, we just recently met with a bunch of superintendents from around the state to discuss the 1+3 concept more aggressively. When Regent Whitmer talked about the completion rates at Madison, La Crosse, and maybe another institution or 2, I don't recall this exactly, but I think it's every freshman, the average credits that a freshman at Madison has when they walk in the doors. Is it 23, Chancellor Blank?
Somewhere in that range.
Somewhere in that range. It's in excess of 20 credits. If you think about that, how do we do that in a way that makes sense, that does not sacrifice quality, does not jeopardize the academic experience? And that's what the conversation we had with the at Elmbrook, but with the superintendents, was all about. As a system of public higher education, we're known and respected for all of this and for being transparent. There's no question about that. We have been, we have a history of it. We can always do better. The initiatives in our 2020 Forward reflect that. And I want to point out that some of the things we're talking about here, and we have to be careful about this, but some of the things we're talking about, streamlining, sharing services, combining those where appropriate, consolidating them, regionalizing them, so that we can shift resources where possible without sacrificing the importance of quality. Those wouldn't be possible without a system. And the whole concept of systemness contributes to this in impressive ways. One of the things that is quoted in the Wisconsin Technology Council report that I want to pull out and share with you, and I'm quoting now directly from that report. And no, I did not write this, so I think it's very good. Wisconsin is, and I quote, blessed to have an exceptional university system by any national or international measure, with many attributes that are the envy of most other institutions and states. End of quote. I want to assure the board and the people of Wisconsin who we're committed to this operational excellence effort. And we need to openly and clearly demonstrate our progress and our success. I think some of the comments I heard today reflect that. So that students and our many other stakeholders continue to have confidence in us, because confidence in higher education is shrinking around the country, as I noted earlier. After all, the people of Wisconsin are counting on us. Let's make sure we deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, President Cross, and thank you very much, Vice President Henderson and Vice President Miller, for excellent presentations of what could have been a very dry subject. But frankly, you made it far more interesting than I expected. Now, as we move on, are there any additional communications, petitions, or memorials from the Regents? Anything? Okay. Then, next, I would ask all board members to stay in place while we complete the roll call vote to move into closed session, and then the Regents will relocate in the Sonata room. Regent Bailey, would you read the closed session resolution?
I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session to A, consider a UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee honorary degree as permitted by 1985, 1F, to deliberate regarding a recommendation for dismissal with cause of a UW-Madison faculty member as